Welcome to this very gentle restorative practice for your luteal phase. This practice is designed to be used on a day of rest and recovery. So it's a great one to rotate in when you're not necessarily engaging in a workout or a full movement practice, but you still want to nourish your body with some movement. This is a restorative practice, so we are being very gentle with the body and just using lots of props, lots of body positioning to get you into that place of rest, to allow you a space to focus on your breath and to move your central nervous system into more of that rest and digest mode where repair happens, where we get an immune boost, and where all of the vital functions in the body can go to work for you. I love this practice for any time throughout the cycle when you just need that little bit of TLC, but particularly during the luteal phase. At the end of the cycle, when either we're in that high hormone territory, lots of things happening in the inner landscape, or towards the very last few days of the cycle when hormone levels drop off. You might be experiencing some fatigue or even some symptoms of PMS, maybe headaches or low back pain. Any of these symptoms that arise can be soothed with this type of restorative practice. So we're really leaning into this movement as medicine and kind of reframing the relationship we have to those signals from the body. Can we shift them from either being a nuisance or something negative to really just being information and being a message from the body, an invitation to slow down and enjoy some of these more nourishing practices, these really restorative practices that can have an impact overall. So treating this part of the practice as a valuable asset, as important as the workouts themselves. Before we move into our practice, I want to go over just a few of the props that we'll be using today that will help drop you into greater comfort, greater ease, so that you can give the body an opportunity to really rest. You're not having to hold any of the postures, but you can use the support of these props to get you there. I'll be using a bolster here for a lot of the postures today. If you don't have a bolster at home, you can always make one by using a rolled up yoga mat. You want it to be pretty firm, pretty solid, and then placing a blanket or a towel over top just to give you that extra cushion. If you don't have an extra mat to roll up, you can always roll up a couple of thick towels, maybe beach towels or bath towels, and stack them together and then wrap those in a blanket or a third towel. When you have your bolster set up, you'll also want an additional blanket or towel. So there's one posture where we will be using the bolster and a blanket to support under the knees. So if you have those things, you can bring that additional blanket or towel with you. And then finally, we'll be using a yoga block. These are great just to provide extra support, provide a way to rest the head in some of the postures, and to just elevate the surface of the floor a bit higher if you need throughout the practice. If you don't have a yoga block, you can use any kind of stool or a heavy book. You can use a box, anything that's going to support your weight and isn't going to move around. That's the key, that it's pretty stable and solid. So without further ado, we will move into our practice now. I'll set some of these props off to the side. And our first posture today is going to be a supported child's pose. This is one of my favorites during the luteal phase. You'll take your knees wide apart, bring your big toes to touch, and then slide your bolster as far up, as close to the body as you can get it. From here, we're simply going to rest the belly fully on the bolster, and you can bring an ear to the mat and rest here. I'll turn to the side simply to maintain the audio quality and just rest here. We'll be in each posture for about a minute, maybe more, depending on how it feels. And the key to any restorative practice is to really allow your body to rest. So while in a hatha or vinyasa practice, the goal is to balance effort with ease. In a restorative practice, we're looking only for the ease, so the sukha quality, where you can really let your body let go and kind of melt into the props beneath you. If this is too much flexion in the knees, know that you can always adjust. So you can bring that extra blanket under the backs of the knees if you like. I'll demonstrate that here for you. So just creating some extra elevation in the knees as appropriate so that you have a bit of extra space. You're not having to move into total flexion of the knee joint. You might keep your eyes closed and really just focus on your breath in and out through the nose. The breath as a very able vehicle for dropping us into the parasympathetic nervous system response, so that rest and digest mode. We'll be here a breath or two more. And as you're ready, slowly pressing yourself up. We'll keep the bolster with us here. And we'll come into a seated forward bend. So you can remove your blanket if you have it under the knees and just transition to a comfortable seat. We'll take the knees nice and wide, almost into a butterfly shape here. And again, bringing the bolster nice and close to the body. Bring the soles of the feet to the bolster. And if you want a bit more hip sensation, you can move the feet either further away, that's going to give you kind of the outer legs, closer together, that's going to give you the inner thighs. The further the legs are away might facilitate greater ease when folding forward. So take a big breath in. And as you exhale, lower onto the bolster here. So this is a nice place, if you need it, to reach for your block, to elevate the surface just a touch more, giving your head a place to rest for the next minute or so. And here, just acknowledging the sensation in the legs. You can bring the head down if that feels better, or one ear to the bolster. So as you rest in each posture, really opening the lines of communication. So what can the body tell you when it is in a state of recovery, when you're allowing it to rest? And more importantly, what are you able to pick up on? What are you able to notice? What subtle sensations can you become aware of when you let the mind rest, you let the body rest? Breathing fluid here in and out through the nose. Let's take 3 more very deep breaths here. Hear the sound of your breath, let it echo, and allow that to invite you deeper into a meditative state. So this place of space and clearing. And then as you're ready, coming out, you can set your block off to the side if you have it. Keep the bolster here and take your knees over to the left side of the bolster. So your right hip is down, and we'll bring the bolster right up close to that hip. And from here, one hand on either side of the bolster, we're coming into a downward facing twist. So we'll bring the belly onto the bolster and bring your left ear to the mat. Let your arms rest by your sides. And again, we'll be here about a minute or so. So here, receiving the twist in a very passive way. Often in yoga, we are using internal force, external positioning to really rotate the spine, but here, just allowing gravity to do the work. As you breathe, feel your belly expand, offering that gentle massage. Can you feel the resistance of the surface beneath you? Notice the sensation in either side of the waist. Can you feel the rotation in the lumbar spine, the lower back? This is a great posture if you experience lower back pain, to gently soothe without excess force. When you are ready, I'll press up. We'll simply exchange sides here. So bringing now the left hip to your bolster or to your yoga mat. And this time, once again, bringing the belly onto the bolster. If it's comfortable, bringing your right ear to the mat. And just resting here. So once again, receiving the effects of the twist. And notice how your legs arrange themselves in space when you sort of release the boundaries or the constraints. Where do they want to rest? Maybe they're stacked, maybe they're slightly apart. Just be here in this restful posture for another 30 seconds or so, deepening the breath. Notice if you feel any different on this side, maybe the lower back a bit more tender or a bit more spacious. And if you are experiencing any symptoms of PMS, perhaps some fatigue or the body just feels heavy and tired, can you lean into that sensation not as something negative, but as information? So as invitation to slow down, invitation to enjoy these practices that we sometimes reserve as kind of only on special occasions or only when we absolutely need it. Can this be a part of your regular practice to rest and nourish the body? Slowly come out as you are ready. We'll set up for Pigeon Pose next. So this can be helpful again to have your block to rest your forehead on. For this one, we'll turn the bolster or your homemade yoga mat bolster so that it's parallel with the short side of the mat. And then step your foot over the bolster, your right foot over the bolster, and bring it to the left side. So it's over to the left. I'm going to shift my blanket out of the way here. Once you have your foot over to that side, begin to walk your left leg out ever so slightly and lower your hips onto the bolster. So you want your sacrum and your pelvis to be completely supported by that bolster. It's not hanging behind or dipping forward. Once you're there in that supported position, just make sure that your back leg is pointing down. And we'll come down and lower into Pigeon Pose. So resting a forehead on the block. Here, just experiencing the deepest of hip opening in a supported way. So find the position on the bolster where you're not having to exert any effort, you're not having to hold your body in space, but instead you can release the weight of your pelvis to gravity. There's no strain in the back leg. And this is a pose that benefits from that deepest breath. So inhaling through the nose and exhaling through the nose. As you inhale, really inflate the lungs so you feel even the bottom chambers of the lungs inflate. And exhale, empty completely. So this helps open the lower belly, open the space in the torso to create more circulation in the hips, to deliver more nutrients to muscles that might be a bit sore or tired. This is a great practice for your rest and recovery days between strength training sessions. And can you give this practice the same amount of attention, the same amount of excitement, of joy that you might a sweaty session or an all-out session? Can this be just as important, just as valuable? Slowly press up as you are ready. And to come out, we'll simply exit in the opposite direction. So coming back onto that right foot, slowly releasing that knee back, and we'll switch sides here. So stepping the left foot over the bolster, heel toe that foot over to the right, and slowly begin to lower onto the bolster once again, making sure that your hips are completely supported. So again, you want the pelvis to be right there on the bolster as best as you can, maintaining that 90-degree bend in your left knee. If that's a bit too much sensation, you can always hug the heel in closer to the bolster and then release the forehead to your block. If you have a yoga block, you can always move it to a higher elevation if folding too far forward creates discomfort. It can be wherever it feels most natural. Again, in a restorative practice, it's a practice of receiving. We're tapping into that feminine quality. So releasing the urge, the desire to shift into effort and staying in that mode of receiving. This can be particularly challenging if you are someone who has a very full schedule and lots of roles that you play, lots of responsibilities. Sometimes it can be hard to shift into receiving mode. But think of this as pouring energy back into the body, back into the system, so that when you need to shift into doing mode, when you need to shift into the pouring out of energy to show up for the people you care about, to show up for your work and other efforts, you can do it from that place of fullness, from a place of joy. So again, just pouring that breath, that sensation back into the body here. Last big breath. And slowly coming out. Once again, just taking care as you exit each posture. Let there be no urgency, no rush. Come back into hands and knees, and we'll place the bolster close to the top of your mat with the block right up next to it with the long edge facing away. So imagine you're going to lay your head on the block there. We'll turn onto the back, and you'll want to place the bolster or your yoga mat right around the shoulder blades, so right at the back of the heart. And this might take a bit of experimenting to find the right spot for you, but you want to be able to rest on the bolster with your arms over top. So it might take a bit of shimmying around to find it. So the bolster's right around the back of the heart, the upper back there, and the shoulders are resting off, sort of hanging in traction off the bolster. So if you find that your shoulders are hunching, or maybe you're having to reach too far, you can shift the bolster down on your back until you find that comfortable space, that place that you can rest. So a very gentle back bend here. If this creates any strain in the low back, you can always bend the knees and let the knees knock in. And just notice where you feel sensation. Can you now focus your breath into the back body? So really puffing the lungs up so much that you feel your back lift off the surface beneath you, or lift into the surface beneath you. Now with the body open skyward, this full gesture of receiving. What is it that you are wanting to gather from your practice? Let it just wash over you here. Let your body fill up. Though this is a quick practice, sometimes a minute or two feels like not quite enough. So my apologies if you're experiencing that that feeling here of wanting to be here just a moment more, like a cozy bed. We'll enjoy one more big breath here together. And slowly let it out. Again, very carefully as you come out, press the backs of your arms onto the surface beneath you to come up to a comfortable seat. We're shifting now to a supine bound angle pose. So we'll turn the bolster so that it is mirroring your spine on the mat. So the long edge parallel to the long edge of your mat. And here's where we'll use that second blanket if you have it. I like to roll the blanket up in kind of a long tube. Once you have that, we'll shift so that your hips are touching the bolster. So you want to be making contact with that surface. And then we'll take this blanket and place it underneath your knees as you bring the soles of the feet to touch. So come into that butterfly shape and then support the outer hips or the outer knees here with that rolled up blanket, that thick, heavy blanket underneath you. So you find your leg position first. Make sure that you have that support, that you can rest the weight of your legs on the blanket. And then we'll slowly lower back into our bound angle pose. So if you need it, you can always, if your bolster is a bit short, maybe your towels aren't quite long enough to support your head, you can always put the block under your head here. And we'll rest here now for several breaths, a minute or two. If it feels good, you can let your eyes close. So again, this is a gentle spine extension that creates some space between the bones. And at the same time, we're creating length across the pelvic floor, the inner thighs. We're kind of letting the hip flexors release completely. So if you find your hip flexors maybe with your hands, just encouraging them to let go, to release the weight of your legs. They work so hard to keep us moving through life safely. Our hip flexors keep us walking, moving, sitting, standing. They work tirelessly to keep our legs in alignment. And so this is an opportunity to release that contraction that can sometimes happen without our conscious awareness. And when we facilitate that relaxation, it can help with low back pain and even with emotional tension that can sometimes have its roots in the deep, deep hip tightness that happens when we're in fight or flight, when we're in an activated state. Let's take one more very big breath together. And then we'll slowly come up, using your hands for support. We're preparing now to enter our final resting pose, our Shavasana, that kind of ultimate rest for the practice. So I'll give you a few options to set up. If you really like how that feels with the bolster along the axis, supporting the axis of your spine, you can keep the bolster here. If it felt like a bit much, you were really starting to feel some sensation in the spine, you can move the bolster off to the side and lie flat on the ground. I recommend having some support under the knees for this Shavasana. So you can use, if you're not using your bolster for the spine, you can bring it under your knees, or you can use your rolled up blanket. So I'll demonstrate with the bolster here, flat on the mat. So you can take your bolster, place it under the knees. If you have a wall nearby, you might rest your hips on the blanket or bolster and then send your legs up the wall. And for comfort, I'm going to place the blanket just under my head here, giving a bit of cushion so that it can feel very restorative, very restful. And as you're ready, you will lower down into your final resting pose. And before we begin, just really let your body drop into rest. So what does that mean for your legs? Do you find yourself still holding the legs in a particular shape? Can you let the knees and the feet splay open? Where do your arms naturally want to fall? You might move your head side to side until you find just the right position. If it's uncomfortable in your back, you can always roll to the side and place the blanket or the bolster between your knees. We'll be here for a longer period of time, about 5 minutes of complete rest for the body. Closing the eyes and letting the eyelids be very soft. Relax all the muscles in your face. Soften the jaw. And release any control you have on the breath. Just let it flow in its natural rhythm. And as thoughts arise, imagine yourself almost as if you were at a bus stop, sitting on a bench, just watching the cars, the buses go by. Not necessarily becoming a passenger on any single one, letting it carry you away, just watching them as they come and go. And if your mind does hop on and take a bit of a ride, know that you can always jump off at the next stop. without urgency and only when you're ready. You might invite movement into your fingers and your toes. Circle the wrists and the ankles. Maybe shift your head from side to side. Bring one hand to heart, one hand to belly. Just feel that feedback, sort of that outer embrace. I'll offer our closing for this practice from this position, such that if you can, if you need, if you want, you might stay a bit longer and enjoy this restful posture. But I will take this opportunity to thank you for nourishing your body with me today and for letting your body be moved.